Welcome back to the Midnight Tapes. Tonight, every story comes from an old house. The kind that creaks before you learn why. The kind that seems to breathe with the weather. The kind that remembers more than its owners ever do. Settle in, let the rain fill the room, and listen closely. Not every sound in a house belongs to the house. The door at the top of the stairs. We bought the house in early autumn, when the trees were beginning to turn and the whole street looked harmless in that soft, golden light realtors love. It was old, built in the 1920s with narrow hallways, original glass doorknobs, and floors that complained under every step. The realtor called it character. My wife called it charm. I called it expensive repairs waiting politely in every wall. But we loved it anyway. There was a small door at the top of the main staircase, tucked into the wall beneath a sloped ceiling. It was low and narrow, the sort of door you had to duck to pass through, and it opened onto a steep set of unfinished wooden steps leading to the attic. The attic itself was nothing special. Exposed beams, dusty insulation, a few old boards laid across the joists. Not a place for children, and we had 2 of them. So after the inspection, after moving day, after the boxes were stacked and everyone was too tired to speak, I closed that little door and slid the latch into place. The first morning it was open. I noticed it while carrying a laundry basket down the hall. The door stood wide at the top of the stairs, and beyond it was a square of blackness that seemed much deeper than the attic should have allowed. I blamed the kids immediately. Our son was 6, our daughter 4, both fascinated by any space that looked forbidden. I closed the door, latched it, and gave them the usual speech over breakfast. No attic, no stairs, no opening that door. They swore they had not touched it. The next morning it was open again. This time I was less patient. I checked the latch, pulled the door open and shut, tested it 10 times. It was not loose. It did not slip. You had to lift the metal hook, pull the door inward, and swing it wide. Could not fall open on its own. Still, I told myself old houses shifted. Maybe the frame was uneven. Maybe the vibrations of everyone walking up and down the stairs shook it free somehow. On the 3rd morning, I found the door open and the latch still raised, as if a careful hand had lifted it and left it that way. That was when I started testing it. First, I tied it closed with a length of cord. I wrapped it around the knob, pulled it tight through the banister, and knotted it hard enough that I had trouble untying it myself. The next morning, the door was open, and the cord was coiled neatly on the floor beneath it. Not cut, not torn, untied and arranged the way you might place a belt on a dresser. My wife told me I was scaring the kids. I told her I was trying not to. The next night, I put a chair in front of it. Not a light chair either, one of the heavy oak dining chairs from downstairs. I wedged it under the knob, tilted just right so the door could not open inward without pushing it away. At 6:10 the next morning, I came out of our bedroom and found the chair at the foot of the stairs, upright, centered, facing the front door. The little attic door above it was open. After that, I bought a bracket and screws from the hardware store. I did not tell my wife until after I had already done it. I closed the door, screwed the bracket across the seam, and stood there in the hallway looking at it with a kind of angry satisfaction. It felt ridiculous, securing an attic door like I was keeping out weather or thieves, but I slept better that night than I had all week. The next morning, the bracket was on the top step. The screws were beside it, lined up in a perfect row, smallest to largest, although I had used only one size. I remember that detail because it made no sense. They were all the same screws when I drove them in. But there they were, for little pieces of metal in graduated order, like someone had corrected me. By the end of the month, I gave up. I told myself it was exhaustion, not surrender. I told myself we were choosing peace. We stopped closing the door. We left it open at the top of the stairs, a dark little mouth in the wall, and for a while that seemed to help. Nothing moved. Nothing untied knots or removed screws. The children slept better. My wife smiled more. The house settled into its old creaks and groans, and I almost managed to believe we had found a compromise with whatever was wrong there. Then one night we heard footsteps, not in the hallway, not outside, from above. A slow, careful step on wood. Then another. Then another. The attic had its own little staircase beyond that door, and I knew the sound of those narrow boards because I had walked them during the inspection. They creaked sharply, one after the other, descending toward the landing. That night, lying beside my wife in the dark, I heard each step taken by something coming down from the attic. My wife grabbed my wrist so hard it hurt. The footsteps reached the little door and stopped. Nothing crossed into the hallway. Nothing came down the main staircase. It simply stood there at the threshold, above us, behind the open door at the top of the stairs. We lay in bed without breathing properly until morning. When the sun came up, the door was still open. The hallway was empty, but there was dust on the floorboards just outside the attic door, shaped like the faint edges of bare feet. After that, it came every night, always at the same time just after the house went quiet. Slow steps down the attic stairs, pause at the threshold, then silence. Some nights the silence lasted minutes, some nights hours. Once, I woke at 3 a.m. and knew without opening my eyes that it was still standing there. I could feel the attention of it pressing through the dark, patient and polite, as if waiting for an invitation it had not yet received. We moved before the year was out. We told people the commute was too long, the repairs too expensive, the school district not what we had hoped. On our last day, after the movers had gone and the rooms were hollow again, I walked upstairs alone. The little door waited open at the top of the stairs. I do not know why I did what I did. Maybe pride, maybe anger, maybe I wanted to prove that leaving was still my choice. I closed it. I slid the latch into place. For a moment the house was completely silent. Then, from the other side of the door, very softly, someone placed a hand against the wood. I left without looking back. And eventually I imagine them leaving it open, because some doors in old houses do not exist to keep you out. They exist to let something know the way down. The previous tenant's mail. The apartment was the bottom half of a divided Victorian house, cheap enough that I should have asked more questions and tired enough that I felt bad asking any. The front porch sagged slightly to one side. The paint had peeled away in curls along the window frames. Inside, the ceilings were high, the radiators hissed in winter, and the floorboards carried sound from rooms that were not mine. But the rent was low, the neighborhood was quiet, and after a year of roommates and thin walls, the thought of living alone made every flaw seem forgivable. The mailbox was mounted beside the front door, one of those old metal boxes with a lid that clanged when the mailman dropped letters inside. During the first week, I found several envelopes addressed to someone named Daniel Harrow. I assumed he had been the previous tenant. That happens. People forget to update addresses. Catalogs follow ghosts of old residents for years. I wrote "Return to Sender" across the envelopes and put them back out. The next day, more came. At first, they were ordinary. A bank notice, a dental reminder, a postcard from a hardware store. Then came the handwritten letters. They were addressed in different hands, all to Daniel Harrow, all using my apartment number. Some were neat and careful, some shaky, some written in ink that had bled slightly where rain had touched the envelope. I returned them too, but the mail kept coming, and after 2 weeks curiosity began to press harder than politeness. The first one I opened was from someone named Elise. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, the radiator clicking behind me, feeling guilty before I had even unfolded the page. "Dear Danny," it began. It was not a normal letter. It did not ask how he was. It did not mention plans or gossip. It said they missed him. It said the house felt empty without him. It said his mother still set aside the Sunday crossword, although she knew he would not be coming over to finish it. The last line read, "I know you are gone, but writing here makes it feel like you might still hear me." I put it down and felt suddenly aware of the room around me. After that, I searched his name online. Daniel Harrow had died 8 months earlier. Heart failure, the obituary said. He was 46, survived by a mother, a sister, and several nieces and nephews. The photo showed a tired-looking man with kind eyes, standing in front of what I recognized as my building. Not just the building, my door. The landlord had not mentioned a death. Of course he had not. His mother wrote the most. Her letters were short, always on pale blue paper. She told Daniel about the weather. She told him when her knees hurt. She told him she still made too much soup and froze the extra. Just in case. She never said she knew he was dead. She wrote as if he were away on a long trip and had simply become bad at answering. Then, one Friday morning, I found an envelope in the outgoing slot. That was impossible for several reasons. I never used the outgoing slot. I paid bills online. I had no stamps. But there it was, tucked neatly beneath the lid, addressed to Daniel's mother in a handwriting I did not know. The return address was my apartment. I stood on the porch for a long time with the envelope in my hand. Inside, the apartment was quiet. Not empty quiet, listening quiet. I should have thrown it away unopened. Instead, I steamed it open over a kettle like a criminal in an old movie and unfolded the paper with shaking hands. "Dear Mom," it said. The handwriting was steady, familiar in the way a stranger's handwriting should not be. I had seen Daniel's signature online on an old fundraiser page. It matched closely enough to make my stomach turn. The letter was warm, loving, ordinary. Thanked her for writing. It said he was sorry he had been quiet. It said he was still in the house and that he was comfortable there, and that she should not cry so much because he could hear it. It said he missed her soup. The final paragraph made the room seem to tilt. You should come visit, it said. The new person is kind. He reads your letters to me. He knows I am still here. I think he would let you in if you knocked. I burned it in the sink. Then Daniel's sister wrote. Her letter said their mother had begun saying Daniel answered her. She said the old woman was sleeping with the phone beside her and waking in the night because she thought he was calling from the other room. She begged him or whoever was reading to stop encouraging her. She said, if you are real, let her go. If you are not, please leave us alone. That night, I woke to the sound of paper sliding across my kitchen table. The apartment was dark except for the streetlight leaking through the curtains. I lay still, listening. There it came again. The dry whisper of paper moving over wood. Then the small tap of something being set down. Pen, maybe. I did not get up. I did not turn on the light. I stared at the bedroom ceiling while, in the kitchen, someone wrote a letter very slowly. Scratch. Pause. Scratch, scratch. Pause. Once, the floorboard outside my bedroom door creaked. In the morning, there were 3 sealed envelopes on the table. One for Daniel's mother. One for Elise. One for his sister. All stamped. All written in that same steady hand. I did not open them. I put them in a metal bowl, carried them outside, and burned them behind the house while the sky was still gray. The smoke smelled like paper, ink, and something faintly sweet, like old flowers left too long in a vase. After that, the apartment changed. The final letter arrived from Daniel's mother near the end of the month. I opened it because I could not stop myself. She wrote that she had dreamed of him standing in a hallway she did not recognize, but that he seemed trapped there, unable to find the front door. She wrote that he kept asking why I burned his letters. She wrote that if he wanted her to visit, she would. She had written the address down. She knew the bus route. She could come on Sunday. I moved out on Saturday. I packed only what I needed, left furniture behind, and pushed the keys through the landlord's mail slot after midnight. Before I walked away, I glanced at the old metal mailbox beside the door. The lid was open. Inside was one envelope, addressed to me. No stamp, no return address, just my name in Daniel's handwriting. I did not touch it. Sometimes I wonder what it said. Sometimes on bad nights I think I already know. It would have thanked me for reading. It would have told me I was kind. It would have said he was lonely. It would have said there was room in the house for more than one person who could not leave. And sometimes I wonder whether Daniel's mother ever made that Sunday trip. Whether she knocked on that old front door with soup in her hands. Whether something inside answered in her son's voice. The basement light. There was one light down there. A bare bulb hanging from a wire at the bottom of the steps. To turn it on, you had to reach into the dark and find the little pull chain. I hated that part most, the half second of feeling around for it while the black space below seemed to lean closer. On my first night, I went down to check the furnace. The house was still full of boxes, and I was trying to be responsible, trying to make sure nothing would explode, flood, or catch fire while I slept. I pulled the chain, the bulb flickered on, and the basement appeared in dull yellow pieces. Furnace, shelves, old paint cans, a cracked laundry sink, stone wall, shadow. I checked what I needed to check, turned the light off, and went upstairs. An hour later, I walked through the kitchen and saw light on the basement door. A thin yellow line shone beneath it. I stood there staring for a moment, annoyed before I was afraid. I was tired. I must have forgotten. I opened the door, looked down the steps, and sure enough the bulb glowed at the bottom, swinging slightly though no air moved. I went down, pulled the chain, watched the room disappear, and came back up. 20 minutes later, the line of light was back. That time I was certain. I had turned it off. I had heard the click. I had stood there long enough to make sure the bulb went dark. Still, there it was again, steady and yellow under the basement door. I spent most of that first night turning the light off. Sometimes it stayed off for 10 minutes, sometimes 30. Once, almost an hour passed before I saw the glow again. The bulb never flicked on while I was watching. It waited until I had walked away, until my back was turned, until the house had settled enough for me to begin believing it might be over. By morning, I was furious and sleep-deprived. The electrician arrived 2 days later. He was an older man named Carl, and he had the patient expression of someone who had spent his career listening to homeowners misunderstand their own houses. He checked the wiring, replaced the pull chain socket, tested the circuit, and told me there was nothing wrong. The bulb could not turn itself on. The switch was mechanical. When the chain was pulled, the contact opened or closed. Simple. "So maybe it's sticking," I said. He shook his head. "It isn't." "Then how is it turning on?" He smiled politely. "You tell me." For a while I tried practical solutions. I unscrewed the bulb when I was not using the basement. The next morning it was screwed back in and glowing. I removed the bulb completely and put it in a kitchen drawer. At 2:15 a.m., I woke because the hallway outside my bedroom was filled with weak yellow light. The basement bulb was back in its socket. The kitchen drawer was still closed. After that, I stopped touching it. For nearly 3 months, that was the arrangement. The basement light remained on day and night. When I passed the door, I could see the glow at the edges. When I carried laundry down, the room was already lit. The shadows pushed into corners. I never liked being down there, but I could tolerate it. The light made the space less deep. Then, in late November, a storm knocked the power out. It happened around midnight. Wind slammed rain against the windows. The house gave a heavy wooden groan, and everything went black. The refrigerator stopped humming. The furnace died. The little digital clock on the stove vanished. I found a candle in a drawer and lit it with hands that felt clumsy in the sudden quiet. The flame made the kitchen look older than it was, all moving shadows and reflected glass. I remember standing there, listening to the storm, when I noticed the basement door. Yellow light shone beneath it. At first, my mind refused to understand. The power was out. The whole neighborhood was dark. I could see that through the kitchen window. No street lights, no porch lights, no glow from any other house. But the basement light was on. I walked toward the door, candle held in front of me, and stopped with my hand on the knob. The metal was cold. Too cold, much colder than the room. I opened the door slowly. The bare bulb burned at the bottom of the stairs, steady and bright. The chain hung perfectly still. I stood at the top step, and for the first time I understood that the light had never needed electricity. The wiring, the socket, the bulb, they were only the shape the thing had chosen. A way to make me accept it. A way to make me stop asking why. From somewhere below, behind the furnace, I heard a soft scrape. Not a footstep, not a rodent, something dragging along stone. The bulb flickered once. I wanted to close the door. Instead, I stared down into the basement because the light made it impossible not to see. That was the worst part. Darkness hides things, but light reveals them. Whatever lived down there had kept the bulb burning not because it feared the dark, but because it wanted the moment to come when I would finally look. The scrape came again, closer. I saw movement at the far edge of the basement, where the shelves cast a thick shadow against the wall. Something pale shifted behind the old paint cans, low to the ground, too long to be a person crawling, but too deliberate to be an animal. It stayed mostly out of sight, as if it understood exactly how much of itself I could bear to see. Then the bulb swung, just once, forward. The light stretched the shadow toward the stairs. I slammed the door and shoved the kitchen table against it. I spent the rest of the night sitting on the floor with the candle burned down to a pool of wax, listening to the thing below move around in the lit basement. It did not come up the stairs. It did not need to. It had already shown me enough. When the power returned at dawn, the yellow line under the door looked ordinary again, almost comforting. That made it worse. I almost warned him, but what could I say? That the light was not for him? That something under the house had been waiting patiently for a person willing to keep it illuminated? On the last day, I stood in the kitchen after everything had been loaded into the truck. The basement door was closed. Light glowed beneath it. I reached for the knob, then stopped. From the other side, gently, the pull chain clicked. The light went out. It stayed out for exactly 3 seconds. Then it came back on by itself. I left it that way. The family in the photos. The farmhouse came furnished, which sounded charming until we realized what that meant. It meant we had inherited other people's chairs, other people's dishes, other people's mattresses, other people's curtains faded in the shapes of windows. The previous owners, an elderly couple, had died within a few months of each other. There were no children, no relatives close enough to claim the contents, and the sale included everything inside. My partner, Anna, loved that at first. She said it made the house feel like a time capsule. I said it made it feel like we had walked into a life that had paused mid-sentence. Still, we were practical. Furniture is expensive, and the old pieces were solid. We kept the dining table, a few bookshelves, a dresser upstairs. We replaced the bed, brought in our own couch, hung our own curtains, and slowly pushed the house towards something that felt like ours. The things we did not want went into boxes or closets to deal with later. That was how we found the photographs. There were 7 boxes of them in the upstairs hall closet, stacked behind a rolled rug and a broken vacuum cleaner. Old black and white portraits, faded Polaroids, square prints from the 1970s with rounded corners, envelopes from pharmacies, all labeled in careful handwriting. Christmas 1964, first snow, Margaret's birthday, kitchen remodel, children on porch. The family in the photographs did not seem frightening. They seemed ordinary. A mother with dark hair pinned up neatly, a father with a narrow face and a stiff smile, 3 children who grew older as the boxes went on. We watched them move through decades in a single afternoon, standing in front of the barn, sitting under the apple tree, wearing paper hats at birthdays, squinting into summer sun. It made us quiet. There is something intimate about looking through the life of a family that is no longer there to explain itself. You begin to notice patterns. The father rarely smiled with his teeth. The youngest boy always stood slightly apart from the others. The mother touched door frames in many pictures, one hand resting on the wood as if steadying herself. About an hour in, Anna found the first impossible photo. She did not say anything at first. She just stared. Then she handed it to me with the careful motion of someone passing a fragile thing. It showed the family standing in a living room. Our living room. At first that meant nothing. Of course it was our living room. They had lived there. The fireplace was the same. The windows were the same. The old house had not moved. But then I noticed the couch. It was our couch. Not the exact same model from decades earlier. Ours. The modern gray couch we had bought from a warehouse store and assembled 2 weeks after moving in. In the photograph, the dead family stood smiling around it, dressed in clothes from the 1950s. Behind them were our shelves, arranged with our books, our little brass lamp, Anna's ceramic bowl from college, the framed print we had hung slightly crooked and promised to fix. I turned the photo over. No date, no writing. Anna laughed once, a small frightened sound. "That's edited," she said. It was not, at least not in any way we could understand. The paper was old. The edges were soft. The colors, though faded, matched the era of the clothing. The family stood in the room with the ease of people posing for a holiday picture, while behind them our belongings waited decades before we owned them. We searched the box faster after that. The next photograph showed them in our bedroom. The mother sat at the foot of our bed, hands folded in her lap. The father stood beside our dresser. One of the children crouched near the laundry basket Anna had left there that morning. Another smiled from the doorway. The next, our kitchen. The family gathered around our small breakfast table, the youngest child holding a mug that said "World's Okayest Nurse," a joke gift Anna used every morning. The next, the hallway upstairs with our runner rug, our shoes by the wall, my jacket hanging from the banister. Photo after photo showed the same dead family inside the house as we had made it, not as it had been. Every arrangement we had chosen, every object we had brought, had appeared around them in images that should have been older than our grandparents. Anna wanted to leave that night. I wanted to be reasonable. Reasonable is a word people use when they are too scared to admit they are scared. Instead of leaving, we burned the photographs. We carried the boxes outside, made a fire in the gravel drive, and fed them in by handfuls. Faces curled, blackened, and vanished. The mother's hand on a door frame, the father's narrow smile, the children on the porch. Then the impossible pictures. Our couch, our bed, our kitchen table, all folding into flame. While they burned, the house behind us looked dark and watchful. That night we rearranged every room. It was Anna's idea, desperate and brilliant. If the photographs matched the arrangement, change the arrangement. Break the pattern. We dragged the couch to the opposite wall, moved shelves, turned the bed, swapped lamps, took down pictures. The house became chaos by midnight, but it felt like action, and action felt like safety. We slept on the floor of the living room because neither of us wanted to be alone upstairs. In the morning, there was a photograph on the kitchen table. It was fresh, glossy, in color. The family stood in the living room, smiling. Our new arrangement surrounded them perfectly. The couch against the opposite wall. The books stacked on the floor because we had not put them back on the shelves. The lamp tipped slightly where I had bumped it and not straightened it. Anna's sweatshirt draped over the arm of a chair. Everything exactly as we had left it after midnight. But the family had changed too. They were no longer dressed in old clothes. Not completely. The father still wore his dark suit, but one of the children had on my jacket. The mother wore Anna's sweater over her dress. The youngest boy held my phone in both hands and smiled down at the black screen. On the back of the photo, in handwriting we had seen on the old envelopes, someone had written, "We can move too." We left within 2 hours. The landlord of the temporary apartment thought we were escaping mold or a bad marriage. We let him think that. The farmhouse went back on the market after months of legal trouble and financial pain. We disclosed everything we could legally disclose, which was nothing anyone would believe. The last time I drove past, there were lights in the windows, new owners, new curtains, a child's bicycle by the porch. I slowed without meaning to. In the upstairs window, for just a moment, I saw a family standing shoulder to shoulder behind the glass. A mother, a father, 3 children, smiling. Behind them, further back in the room, stood 2 other figures I recognized only by posture. One had Anna's slight tilt of the head. The other stood like me, and they are not supposed to smile before you do. The knocking pipes. The landlord warned me about the pipes before I signed the lease. He said it casually, with the little shrug people use when they have decided a problem is too old to fix. "They knock at night," he said. "Heating system. Old building. You'll get used to it." He was right about the first part. The pipes knocked. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a brick building that had once been a boarding house, then student housing, then cheap rentals for people like me who needed a place quickly and did not ask too many questions. The radiators were iron, painted over so many times the edges had softened. When the heat came on, the whole building seemed to wake in its bones. Hissing, clanging, ticking, knocking. First, I barely noticed. Everyone who has lived in an old apartment knows those sounds. They become part of the weather indoors. You sleep through them the way you sleep through rain. But after a few weeks, I started hearing patterns. Not random knocks, not the scattered expansion of metal. Patterns. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. Long pause. 1 knock. Then later, for knocks. Pause. For knocks. Pause. 2. One night, close to midnight, the pipes knocked 3 times from the wall beside my bed. Without thinking much, I knocked back 3 times. The pipes went silent. Not quieter. Silent. The radiator stopped ticking. The wall stopped clicking. The whole apartment seemed to hold its breath. I sat upright, hands still raised. Then, slowly, from inside the wall, came 3 knocks. Exactly 3. I laughed because the alternative was not laughing. It was a coincidence, of course. It had to be. I knocked twice. The wall answered twice. I knocked 5 times. Fast. The wall answered 5 times. Fast. After that, I should have stopped. Instead, I made it a game. There is a comfort in being answered, even by something you do not understand. I began speaking to it in knocks. 1 knock for yes, 2 for no. That was a mistake, but it felt harmless at the time. I would ask questions softly in the dark. Are you in the wall? 1 knock. Are you a person? Pause. 2 knocks. Are you alone? A long pause. 1 knock. That answer stayed with me. The next night, I asked, were you here before me? 1 knock. Before the last tenant? 1 knock. Before the building was apartments? 1 knock. I stopped asking questions for a few days. Then the knocking began without me. I told myself I did not owe the pipes anything. Still, eventually I knocked back. The change happened in February, during a cold snap when the windows frosted from the inside and the radiators ran almost constantly. I had been asleep, and the knocking woke me. 3 knocks from the wall. I answered 3. Instead of matching me, the wall erupted. Not loud exactly, but long. A sequence of knocks and pauses, rapid then slow, hard then soft, stretching on for nearly a minute. It was not copying. It was communicating, telling me something in a language I had encouraged but never learned. I sat frozen while the message went on. When it stopped, I whispered, I don't understand. From inside my bedroom closet came a single knock. I turned toward it so quickly my neck hurt. The closet door was closed. It had always fit poorly, swollen by humidity, and I rarely used it because it stuck. The knock came again, not metallic now, not through pipes. Wood on wood. Knuckle against the inside of the closet door. 3 knocks. A pause. 2 knocks. A long pause. 1 knock. The original pattern. I did not move. Another sequence began, slow and deliberate. The closet door trembled slightly with each impact. Something was inside, knocking out a message it had been practicing through the walls, waiting for the conversation to become direct. I slept in the hallway that night. Not well. Not really at all. At dawn, I called the landlord and told him the closet door was stuck. He arrived annoyed, carrying a screwdriver. I did not tell him what had happened. I just stood in the kitchen while he forced the bedroom closet open. It was empty. Of course it was empty. There were no marks on the inside of the door. No person. No animal. No explanation. The landlord gave me a look that said he had rented to people like me before and expected this to become inconvenient. The knocking stopped for 3 nights. Then, at 11:43, it came from the closet again. I began sleeping with the closet door open. That helped for 1 night. On the second, the knocking came from beneath the bed. On the third, from inside the bathroom cabinet. On the fourth, from the kitchen cupboard under the sink. It was moving through hollow spaces. Or maybe it had always been in all of them. By then I understood the mistake. The thing had not wanted conversation. It had wanted acknowledgement. It had been knocking in that building long before I arrived, using pipes and walls and radiators because those were the places people ignored. Then I knocked back. I told it in the only language it had that I heard it. And once something knows you can hear it, silence becomes rude. I moved out before spring. On my last night, with boxes stacked by the door and the apartment stripped nearly bare, I sat on the mattress and listened to the building settle. No knocks came. The pipes hissed and clicked like ordinary pipes. For one foolish moment I felt sad. I thought maybe I had imagined more than I wanted to admit. Maybe loneliness had made a haunting out of heat. Then the front door knocked. 3 times. I had not given anyone the new address yet. No friend was coming. No neighbor had reason to visit after midnight. The knocks came again. 3. Pause. 2. Pause. 1. I did not open the door. I did not answer. I sat in the dark until dawn while the thing on the other side knocked gently, patiently, in the rhythm we had built together. And the worst invitations are the ones you give by accident. The room that was sealed. The house was too big for us, which was part of why we wanted it. My wife and I had spent years in apartments where every sound belonged to someone else. Footsteps overhead, televisions through walls, arguments in hallways. So when we found the old house on Maple Road, with its wraparound porch and 4 upstairs bedrooms and attic rooms we had no use for, the empty space felt luxurious, felt like breathing room. The problems were obvious. The wiring needed updating. The upstairs bathroom had to be rebuilt. Wallpaper peeled in long strips from the hallway. But the bones were good, the inspector said. Old houses settle. Old houses hide things. He said that last part jokingly. He was right. During the renovation, our contractor, Miles, noticed the measurements did not match. He had been replacing drywall upstairs when he came downstairs with a tape measure still hooked to his belt and a look on his face I did not like. "You're missing a room," he said. I laughed because I did not understand. He showed us. The hallway wall ran between 2 bedrooms, but the exterior measurements left a pocket of space between them, roughly 10 by 12 feet. No door, no window visible from outside because that side of the house had been covered by a later addition. Somewhere in the history of the building, a room had been sealed completely into the structure. My wife was excited immediately. Secret rooms do that to people. They turn adults into children. We imagined old trunks, newspapers, maybe furniture, maybe nothing but dust. Miles did not share our excitement. "I've opened sealed spaces before," he said. "Usually people close them for a reason." "What kind of reason?" He looked at the wall for a long moment. "Not a good one. That should have been enough." It was not. We asked him to open it the next morning. I remember the sound of the saw cutting through plaster. Not because it was loud, though it was, but because after the first cut the house seemed to go quiet around it. The workers downstairs stopped talking. The air felt heavier. Even the street outside seemed farther away. When the first section of wall came loose, cold air poured out. It was summer. The upstairs hallway had been hot all week. But the air from that sealed room came out damp and cold enough to raise bumps along my arms. It smelled old, not just dusty, but trapped. Like a cellar, a closed drawer, and wet cloth left in a box. Miles stepped back. "You feel that?" We did. He made the opening larger, and we shined a work light inside. The room was small and windowless. The walls were plaster. The floorboards were bare. No boxes. No treasure. No forgotten furniture except one wooden chair placed in the exact center of the room, facing the sealed doorway. Facing us. That was the first thing wrong. The second was the floor. Around the chair, the boards were scuffed in a wide circle, as if someone had paced there for years. Not days, not weeks, years. The path was worn pale against the darker wood. One section near the wall had deep scratches, as though bare heels or dragging nails had tried to dig into it. The third wrong thing was the writing. On the wall opposite the chair, words had been scratched into the plaster. The same 4 words over and over, hundreds of times, layered until they became texture. "Let me out now." Higher up, the letters were steady. Lower down, they became frantic. Some were so deep they cut through to the lath beneath. Some were low enough that the person writing them must have been sitting or lying on the floor. Near the bottom, the words stopped being words and became gouges. No one spoke for a while. My wife began crying quietly. Miles muttered something I did not catch and turned the work light away from the writing, as if that could undo seeing it. We should have called someone. Police, maybe. Historians. Priest. I do not know. Instead, we did what frightened people do when they discover they have touched something they cannot explain. We tried to put it back. "Seal it," I said. Miles looked at me. "You wanted it open. Now I want it closed." He did not argue. The workers left early that day. Miles stayed and patched the opening himself. Before he closed it completely, my wife asked him to remove the chair. He refused. Not rudely, firmly. "That chair belongs in there," he said. I thought that was strange at the time. Later, I understood he was afraid to touch it. By evening, the wall was sealed again. Fresh plaster covered the opening. We told ourselves the room was closed, the mistake corrected. But the house did not feel the same. It felt larger, not smaller, as if opening the hidden room had made space somewhere else. That night we heard pacing. It came from the hallway, slow steps, bare feet on wood, back and forth between the 2 bedrooms, tracing the place where the sealed room had been. My wife and I sat upright in bed, listening. The steps stopped outside our door. Then something scratched once against the wood, softly, almost politely. I did not open it. In the morning, there were plaster flakes on the floor outside the patched wall. Miles returned to finish sanding. He saw the flakes and said nothing. He worked quickly. Before leaving, he gave me a piece of advice I had not asked for. If you hear it, don't answer. I asked what he meant. He looked toward the upstairs hall. Rooms remember being opened. For 3 nights, the pacing continued. Always after midnight, always along the same stretch of hallway. Sometimes the footsteps were slow and tired, sometimes quick, almost excited. On the 4th night, the scratching began again, not at our bedroom door, but inside the walls. Let me out now. I did not see the words then. I heard them. Scratch, scratch, pause. Scratch. A rhythm like writing, moving through the plaster. In the morning, faint lines had appeared beneath the wallpaper in the hallway. At first they looked like cracks. Then, as the sun shifted, the letters became visible. Let me out now. We painted over them. They came back darker. We hung a framed print. The glass cracked across the words. Then I found the chair. It was in the guest room. The wooden chair from the sealed room, the one Miles had refused to touch, stood in the corner facing the bed. Dust clung to it. The seat was scratched. One front leg was shorter than the others, making it tilt forward slightly, like someone leaning in to listen. The patched wall in the hallway was intact. My wife left that afternoon and stayed with her sister. I remained one more night, not because I was brave, but because someone had to pack documents and arrange the emergency sale. That night the house was quiet. No pacing, no scratching, no pipes, no wind, just thick, waiting silence. At 3 a.m., I woke to the feeling that someone was sitting on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped near my feet. In the dark, a voice whispered, very close to the floor, "Thank you." I did not move. The mattress slowly rose. Bare feet crossed the room. The door opened. The steps went into the hallway and stopped near the sealed wall. Then the scratching began again, but not from inside the wall this time. From outside it. By dawn, the plaster was covered in words, written from the hallway side in long, jagged lines. Let me in now. Years later, I checked the address online. The house had been renovated beautifully. New paint, new windows, separate apartments. In one listing photo, upstairs between 2 bedrooms, there was a narrow door I had never seen before. It was open. Behind it, in the dark, I could just make out the back of a wooden chair. The grandfather clock. I inherited the house from my great-aunt Lydia, a woman I remembered mostly as perfume, pearls, and a voice that made children stand straighter. She had no children of her own, and by the time she died, most of the family had scattered or stopped speaking over old grudges no one could fully explain. So the house came to me, along with its heavy furniture, framed portraits, silverware, and the enormous grandfather clock in the front hall. The clock was impossible to ignore. It stood taller than any person, dark wood polish to a dull shine, with a brass pendulum that swung behind glass. Its ticking filled the hall and reached every room in the house, slow and patient, like a second heartbeat beneath my own. At night, when the rest of the house settled, that ticking became the sound of the place itself continuing. The estate lawyer gave me the key to the clock in a small envelope. "Family tradition," he said. "Keep it wound." I asked what happened if I did not. He looked at me as though I had asked what happened if I stopped breathing. "They always kept it wound." That was not an answer, but it was delivered with enough weight that I remembered it. The first week, I lived out of boxes and tried to decide what to do with a house I had not asked for. Every evening, I wound the clock because the lawyer had said to, and because rituals are easy when you are alone in a house that does not yet feel yours. On the seventh night, I woke at 3:48. I know the time because the clock struck once. Not a full chime, just a single deep note that rolled through the dark and stopped abruptly. Then the ticking ceased. Silence filled the house so completely that I sat up in bed before I was fully awake. In the morning, I found the clock stopped at 3:48. The pendulum hung still. I opened the glass, nudged it, and the ticking resumed. The clock kept perfect time all day. The next night, it stopped at 3:48 again. And the next, I called a clock repairman who drove out from 2 towns over and spent an hour examining the mechanism. He oiled gears, adjusted weights, checked the pendulum, and said the clock was in remarkable condition for its age. "Why does it stop at 3:48? I asked. He looked at the face, then at me. "It doesn't want to go past it." I thought he was joking. He was not smiling. After he left, I called my cousin Elaine, who was older than I was and knew the family stories because she enjoyed collecting discomfort. When I mentioned the time, she went quiet. "Do you know about Arthur?" she asked. I did not. Arthur was my great-grandfather. He had died in that house long before I was born, collapsing in the front hall beside the clock. Heart attack, family legend said. The time of death was recorded by the doctor as 3:48 in the morning because that was the time on the clock when they found him. It had stopped at the moment he died. "They restarted it," Elaine said, "and after that it stopped every night at the same minute. So they kept it wound. Every day. Always." "Why?" She hesitated. "Aunt Lydia used to say the ticking kept him moving along." I almost laughed. "Moving along where?" "I don't know. Just don't let it stay stopped." That warning did what warnings often do. It made me curious. Then, one night, after a long workday and too much wine, I decided to prove everyone ridiculous. At 3:48, the clock stopped. In the morning, I did not restart it. The house was quiet all day. Not peaceful. Quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you notice your own swallow, the creak of your chair, the hum inside your ears. I worked in the dining room and kept glancing toward the hall, expecting the tick to return because a part of me had already accepted it as natural. It did not. By evening, the silence had weight. I ate dinner standing at the kitchen counter. I watched television too loudly. Around midnight, I went to bed and told myself I would restart the clock in the morning. It had been an experiment. Nothing had happened. At 3:48, footsteps began in the front hall. I woke instantly. The steps were slow and uneven. the sound of a heavy man pacing on old floorboards, back and forth, from the front door to the clock, from the clock to the front door. Each turn was marked by a pause, as if the walker were confused to find a wall or door where he expected passage. I lay in bed, staring into darkness. The footsteps continued for 15 minutes, then 20, then an hour. At some point they came up the stairs, one step at a time, slow, heavy, dragging slightly on the left. The hallway outside my room creaked. The knob turned halfway and stopped. I had not locked the door. I had not even closed it fully. The door opened an inch. In that narrow gap, I heard a man breathing. Not violently, not like a monster, like an old man who had walked too far and did not understand why he was tired. Then the voice came. Lydia. It was soft, bewildered, heartbroken. The door closed. The footsteps went back down the stairs. The first light, I ran to the clock and restarted it. The pendulum swung, the tick returned, and the entire house seemed to exhale. I wound it until my fingers hurt. I thought that would be the end. I had learned my lesson. But some doors, once opened, do not close as neatly as before. I found Lydia's journals in a cedar chest that winter. Most were ordinary. Weather, church events, complaints about neighbors. Near the end of one, written after her husband died, I found several pages about the clock. She wrote that Arthur did not leave when he died. Not fully. For the first week, they heard him pacing every night, trapped in the hall where he had fallen. He called for his wife, for water, for help. Then Lydia's father wound the clock and noticed that while it ticked, Arthur moved with it. Not free exactly, but carried. The ticking gave him direction. The stopping gave him a place to return. The final line of the entry read, "As long as it moves, so does he." I keep the clock wound now. Every night before bed, no matter how tired I am, I turn the key. Every morning, I restart it after 3:48. I have tried hiring people to maintain it. I have installed cameras. The cameras fail at 3:47 and return at 3:49. The repairmen say the mechanism is fine. Everyone says the mechanism is fine. They are right. The clock is not broken. It is busy. I will tell them the truth if I can. I will say that a clock stopped at the hour of death is not a clock anymore. It is a doorway held at the exact moment someone failed to leave. The ticking does not measure time. It keeps that moment moving just enough that the dead do not settle fully into the house. And whatever you do, whatever you believe, do not let the silence last. Because once he remembers how to stop, he starts looking for the living. The house that remembered us. I had not seen the house in 32 years. Memory is kind because it edits decay. I expected the real house, if it still stood, to be smaller, uglier, maybe abandoned. I was driving through the area for a conference and took the old road on impulse. No plan, no sentimental speech, just a turn of the wheel before I had time to talk myself out of it. The road had changed. New mailboxes, a wider ditch, a cell tower visible beyond the fields. But when I reached the bend near the old creek, I saw the roofline through the trees and felt something inside me go still. The house was exactly the same, not similar, not well maintained, the same. The siding was bright, not freshly painted, but somehow unfaded in the precise shade I remembered. The green shutters had the small chip on the lower corner of the left upstairs window, a chip from when I hit it with a baseball at age 10. The porch swing hung from the same chains. The apple tree leaned at the same angle. My mother's flowers grew along the walk, not the descendants of those flowers, not a similar garden, but the same red and yellow pattern she planted every spring, blooming as though she had watered them that morning. I parked across the road and stared. No house stays unchanged for 32 years. Wood rots. Owners repaint. Storms break branches. Gardens die. Childhood homes do not wait like museum exhibits for the child to return. This one had. I should have driven away then. Even now, that is the moment I replay most often. The engine was running. The road ahead was clear. I had a hotel room 2 hours away and a normal life waiting beyond the bend. All I had to do was leave. Instead, I got out. The air smelled like cut grass and summer dust, though it was October. As I walked up the path, the porch boards creaked in the exact sequence I remembered. First board soft, second sharp, third nearly silent. The front door was the same blue my mother had loved. My father's old brass knocker still hung in the center, polished by impossible use. Before I touched the knob, the door opened, just a few inches. Warm air drifted out, carrying the smell of roast chicken, laundry soap, and my mother's perfume. I said, "Hello." No one answered. Inside, the entryway was lit by afternoon sun falling through the glass beside the door. Our coat rack stood against the wall. My father's brown jacket hung from the left hook. My mother's gardening hat hung from the right. Beneath them were my old sneakers, the ones with blue stripes, laces knotted because I used to refuse tying them properly. I stepped inside. The house did not feel abandoned. It felt occupied in the most ordinary way. Dust did not cover anything. The air was warm. Somewhere deeper inside, a radio played quietly. The old kitchen radio my mother tuned to the same station every morning. A woman's voice gave the weather for a year that was not this one, then faded into static and music. I walked into the living room. Everything was there. The brown sofa with the sunken cushion on the left. The coffee table with the ring stain from my father's mug. The bookshelf where I used to hide Halloween candy behind encyclopedias. Family photographs lined the mantel. My school picture from 3rd grade. My parents on vacation. My sister before she stopped speaking to us. All of us smiling from a life that had ended decades ago. I picked up one photograph and nearly dropped it. It was not dusty. The frame was warm. From the kitchen, a voice called, "Dinner's ready." My mother's voice, not a memory of it, not an imitation. Her voice exactly as it had been when I was 12 and late coming in from the yard. Warm, faintly scolding, full of the ordinary love I had spent half my life missing. I could not breathe. She called again. "Wash your hands first." I walked toward the kitchen because grief is stronger than fear for the first few seconds. The table was set for 4. My father's chair, my mother's, My sisters. My plates full. Steam rising. A glass of milk at my place, though I had not drunk milk in years. A small scrape marked the table beside my plate where I had once carved my initials with a pocket knife and lied about it. No one was in the room, but the back door screen swung gently, as if someone had just stepped outside. On the counter sat a birthday cake. I knew that cake. Chocolate, uneven frosting, blue candles. My 13th birthday. The year I cried because my father bought the wrong baseball glove and then felt guilty for crying. The year my mother hugged me in the pantry and said, "Someday you'll want all this back, even the bad parts." The candles were lit. Wax ran down them slowly. From upstairs came the sound of my sister laughing. She was alive somewhere in the world, older now, distant and real. But the laugh from upstairs was her at 9 years old, bright and sharp and careless. Then came my father's voice from the hallway, asking if I had finished my homework. The house was not showing me ghosts. It was offering me a version of time that had never had to end. That was worse. I backed away from the kitchen. The floorboards beneath me creaked exactly as they had when I tried sneaking snacks after bedtime. The house knew my weight. It knew the pauses in my steps. It knew where I would look next. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like an apple, was a drawing I had made as a child. Our house in crayon, for stick figures outside. A sun in the corner, smoke from the chimney. But there was something new on the drawing, something I had not made. A fifth figure stood in an upstairs window, tall, dark, watching the family below. Under the drawing, in my mother's handwriting, were the words, "You came home." The kitchen chair scraped behind me. I turned. My place at the table had pulled itself out. The food smelled incredible. Not just good. Correct. It smelled like snow days, like being forgiven, like my mother humming while washing dishes, like every safe moment of childhood condensed into one room. My eyes filled with tears so fast I could not see clearly. My mother's voice came from very close behind me. "Sit down, sweetheart." I ran. I ran through the hallway, past the photographs, past my father's jacket, past the little shoes that had once fit me. The front door seemed farther away than it should have been. The hallway stretched. The radio grew louder. From upstairs, my sister called my name. My father asked where I thought I was going. My mother began to cry. That almost stopped me. Not fear, not the hallway, her crying. The sound reached into me like a hand and found every soft place. I had not been with her when she died. I had arrived too late. For years I told myself that was unavoidable, but the guilt remained, patient and well-fed. Hearing her cry in that house nearly turned me around. Then I saw the window beside the front door. In the reflection behind me, the hallway was full of people. My mother, my father, my sister as a child, myself as a child, others too. Faces I did not know, standing in the rooms beyond, pale and still. Not all family, not all human-looking. The house had remembered more than us. It had kept every person who loved it enough, missed it enough, or entered it while wanting something back too badly. They were all watching me. and all of them were smiling except the child version of me. He was crying. I reached the door, tore it open, and stumbled onto the porch. The air outside was suddenly cold October again. The flowers along the walk were brown and dead. The siding was gray with age. The porch swing hung by one chain. Behind me, the house groaned like something waking from a pleasant dream. I ran to the car and drove until the road became highway and the highway became city lights. I did not tell anyone for years. Who would believe it? That a house had preserved my childhood like a trap? That grief could have architecture? That love, if kept too perfectly, could become a cage? But the worst part is not that I ran. The worst part is that I still think about going back. I know what would happen if I returned. I know I would sit. I know the house would fold around me, gentle as a blanket. I would become another photograph on the mantel, another voice calling from another room, another preserved thing waiting for the next person who could not bear the shape of the present. The house is still there. It remembers the road. It remembers my footsteps. And I am afraid that someday missing her will matter more to me than leaving. That's all for tonight. The old houses are quiet now, or at least quiet enough to let us pretend. Let the rain keep falling. Let the dark stay where it is. Your door is locked. Your room is yours. And every sound you hear belongs to this moment. Sleep well. I'll see you again after midnight.